Welcome back to Whiskey Politics, and on behalf of Ricochet.com, we are still on the Weekly Standard Cruise, and we're delighted to have here today Mollie Hemingway, senior editor over at the Federalist. And for those on Ricochet who remember Mollie, an editor from some time ago, many moons ago. And before we even start, I just want to say on behalf of the members at Ricochet, you are sorely missed, and a lot of salutations and hellos out to you from the members.
Great. Well, I still lurk there all the time, and I love Ricochet. So.
Well, it misses you. So anytime you want to contribute, it would be wonderful to have you. So I want to kind of jump into, obviously, a post-election discussion here as far as what we've been talking about on the panels this week. And one of the things that you've been focused on, not only just here, but also on Fox, CNN, MSNBC, is do the Democrats... did they get it? Do they understand what just happened?
It's been one of the more interesting things, is not the first few days where you expected people maybe to have a little bit of a freak out, but now we're going into 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, and people are still just in that frenzy, and they don't seem to really want to understand what went wrong. In their minds, everything can be explained via fake news and the racism of Trump voters, and that's as far as they've made it in their recovery process.
Do you foresee that continuing, or is there going to be an evolution?
I don't know. It's really interesting. I think there will be different portions of the Democratic Party and the left going in different directions. There is a group that is leaning hard into identity politics. That's really all they've got, and they will continue to do that. There is a probably much more threatening rise of socialism, a sort of populist socialism that I think will gain a lot of ground in the years to come, and there will be a cleavage between those two groups, I imagine.
You refer to a political distinction of political correctness and how it's run amok. Is that, in your mind, one of the major reasons why there was such a lashback against the political correctness, the Democrats, the identity politics, as you've called it?
Yeah, I think that it was very confusing to observe the Trump phenomenon and know that Donald Trump is not a social conservative, and yet you saw that there was this cultural aspect of his victory, and I think it was political correctness and the opposition to political correctness that united a lot of people who have different ideas on the proper posture to take on different cultural issues. But they really hate this idea that in the United States, which should be, it's a free country, as we like to say, that you couldn't say certain things, couldn't think certain things, that certain ideas were just decided by elites that they were beyond the pale. And sometimes the things that were decided to be beyond the pale weren't beyond the pale at all. And enough people were frustrated with this, and seeing how it played out in academia, in the media, in pop culture, I do think that was a significant part of the Trump victory, and it's a significant cultural issue, and I actually think it's a great thing. I think that whatever else you think of the Trump victory, the fact that a big group of Americans unite in opposition to this type of sort of cultural totalitarianism is a great sign.
That stems from higher education and the left and the media. If you go to some of the higher education, the colleges, university institutions today, is that a place that you believe a conservative message you can plant a seed and it can take root? The Ben Shapiro's of the world and the others that are doing speeches like yourself?
It's really interesting. I think we'll know more in the years to come how hostile academia is, or how hostile the university environment is. I think it's definitely ripe for hearing arguments from conservatives about how free expression is a good thing, and tolerance means that you have to learn about other opinions, much less learn deeply about other opinions. But I am also worried that these university environments will be even more threatened by free expression and will start suppressing other people and their opinions even more. I don't know how it'll go forward, but certainly for the sake of the universities, I think it's important for them to open up a little more.
Do you think 2016 we saw a cultural shift? You referred here this week, and you've talked about it elsewhere, about the BuzzFeed situation, the article that came out. I think it was Chuck and Gina Gaines?
Yes.
Gene Gaines? Yeah.
Yeah, Chuck and, I know, I think Judy? I don't know.
Okay.
Judy and Chip? Joanna and
Joanna.
Chip.
Joanna.
I don't watch this show, but it's a very popular show called Fixer Upper,
right.
And they go around and they they miraculously transform homes in a matter of just a few weeks, always under budget, on time, and it looks beautiful. So it's a totally unrealistic reality television show. They're very popular, and it turns out that they're Christian, and they go to a church that's Christian, and the pastor has spoken about Christian sexual morality in a way that is completely different than what you get from mainstream media. BuzzFeed found this out, and they started targeting them, trying to gin up a social media mob against these people. It's the same thing you've seen going back 8 years or so. Well, however many years you've seen these mobs that try and force everybody to conform their opinion to what the mainstream media's opinion is. And instead what happened is all sorts of people who maybe totally disagree with Chip and Joanna Gaines on the issue of sexual morality started defending them and telling BuzzFeed to back off. I mean, started looking up who their advertisers were and contacting the advertisers and saying, you need to stop BuzzFeed from doing this type of mob mentality. It's dangerous. You could have these people threatened, their lives threatened, their livelihood threatened. It was a very different reaction than we've seen where people just end up kowtowing and succumbing to that pressure. So I'm hopeful that, again, no matter what the general issue is, that we provide a space for people to have different ideas, that Christians can actually exist in the public square without having BuzzFeed decide that they need to be driven out of the country.
Another question about the media for you. You've mentioned that you are concerned that the media will fall back into its regular archetype and use polling as its lead in the next elections. And we all know that the polling was completely wrong in this last one.
Right. There was this I was preparing to do a TV hit right before the election, and we were all having a candid discussion about what we really thought would happen. And while I had actually thought that Trump would win as far back as January, and I had even bet my colleagues that he would...
One of the few.
Yeah, but I bet my colleagues that he would win. There at the end, I thought, well, the polling is pretty obvious she's going to win. And this woman who works for the Examiner, Susan Ferrecchio, said, the polling is always wrong. It doesn't mean that Hillary's not going to win, but there's always something significantly wrong with the polling. They miss this state or this region or that demographic. And she said, I just try not to rely too much on the polling. And I thought that was really interesting. 4 years ago, a lot of conservatives were burned by not believing polls. And then this time around, I think people were more hesitant to disbelieve polls because of that. But we should always be skeptical of polling. We should be aware of the limits there. But I'm worried that in 4 years, nobody will be skeptical of the polling. It will drive the coverage again. And when you think back through this campaign, polling drove every aspect of the media coverage, and what was considered important to cover and what wasn't considered important to cover. Just the entire tenor of the campaign of the media coverage was controlled by polling. So I'm just hopeful that in 4 years we could actually have coverage that was more built around more important things than who happened to be up or down at a given moment. But like the underlying issues or the situation on the ground throughout the country.
With the hatred that we saw against the media, the distrust that we see against the media, I think they're at all-time lows right now. What do you see as obviously somebody that participates in the media on a frequent basis, what do you see as the future for political media, for political types?
I expected after this election, as soon as we saw that Donald Trump was going to win, I expected you would see from the media a major mea culpa where they said, oh, we really messed up, and really looking inward at all the different ways that they messed up. And they didn't. They haven't in any way been reflexive about their errors. They haven't fixed the problems with how they've covered things. I think a big problem with their coverage is that they try and push an agenda, they push a narrative rather than just reporting what's actually happening. And I was hoping that we would see these really big systematic changes to how they hire, how they cover things. They're not even changing anything at all. And I don't think they will. I don't even think they have the imagination or intelligence to change how they do things. And so I imagine something very big will happen to the media, sort of a drain the swamp push, but it's not going to happen for a few years. People are going to get more and more frustrated. And the more the media try to basically move towards censorship, which I think is a big part of their what they're talking about with fake news, is really laying the groundwork to be able to censor news that they don't like, because they're feeling out of control, like they can't control how people are voting, and so they think that that putting more restrictions on what people read and see will be the cure. I think you'll see more and more tension, and it's going to be a big blow up, but in a few years.
It might be in a few years. Let's shift a little bit over to more political matters. And obviously you have Republicans, let's just say they own everything, from the states all the way up to the White House. One of the things that you've written about, you're concerned about, is that Congress at this stage might now slow walk a lot of the agenda that they've been elected to implement with Trump. Why would you be concerned about that? For example, repealing and replacing Obamacare. Some folks are talking about 2 years, some talking about 5 years, and so.
Right. It'll be really interesting to see how Congress handles the next 2 years. I think there is some concern that Congress itself, and both Senate and the House, believe that they'll be in a stronger position in 2 years. Because 2 years from now, you have a lot of Democrats who have vulnerable seats in the Senate that will be up, and that should be to the advantage of Republicans. Having said that, as we just talked about on a Cruz panel, Bill Kristol was noting that every 2 years after a new president is elected, it's usually bad for that party.
Right.
So people should not count on things getting better in 2 years. Anything could happen in the next 2 years. You could have a recession. You could have just something that causes people to be very angry at Republicans. So if they want to accomplish things, they should probably try and accomplish it deliberately but quickly, and have a game plan for how to get as much done in the next 2 years as possible. In addition, I think that a lot of what fed the Trump movement was just unbelievable hatred and loathing for how much Americans have done this thing where they elect Republicans with the promise that Republicans are going to do something great, and then the Republicans don't do it. And that really fueled a lot of the energy for Trump. Was just people are sick of doing what they were supposed to do, elect Republicans or elect conservatives, and then not getting enough to show for it.
Okay. What would you hope, if you were Bannon, if you were the advisor, what would you hope would be accomplished in the first 100 days?
I'm not sure about Bannon, and I'm not sure what he wants to see accomplished. Right. I think he.
Well, let's say we're playing that role.
Yeah. So I think that the way. So I'm not entirely sure, but my big focus would be on getting a really good Supreme Court pick nominated and getting them through. I mean, that was another big motivator of the Trump victory. That was one of their main arguments for Trump was, you got to elect me because Hillary Clinton will fill the court and all these federal courts with horrible, horrible justices that will destroy your way of life. And I think that was a very compelling argument. It was for me personally, and it was for a very important demographic for the Republican Party, which would be like social conservatives or religious conservatives. Donald Trump absolutely has to make good on his promise. He already put forth a list of very good justices, and he needs to pick one of those names, get that name through, and that should be a difficult confirmation battle just because of the narrow margins in the Senate, but he needs to make sure that happens. And if he does that, I think that will also give him a lot of leeway to accomplish other parts of his agenda that are in no way conservative. He has this, Bannon, I think, has the infrastructure plan to spend a huge pile of cash on infrastructure. That's not something that most Republicans or conservatives would be super eager about, but if you get a few good things passed, and if you make good picks, I mean, this transition has been full of, I think, picks that many conservatives are very happy with. That's setting the groundwork for him to be able to accomplish other things that aren't particularly conservative.
On those infrastructure projects that have been talked about during the election and as subsequently since, you're getting partial agreement from the other side. Chuck Schumer, Elizabeth Warren, they're saying these are things we can work with Trump on.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's never going to be enough for them, but do you think that the Republicans are even going to be able to support any of it?
Oh, I think Republicans will have no problem supporting a lot of it, unfortunately. But you're absolutely right about Chuck Schumer. I mean, he has been quite noticeably non-hostile toward Donald Trump, and they have a friendship that goes back many decades. Chuck Schumer is always pleased to mention to people that Donald Trump is his second highest donor throughout history. Right. I think Donald Trump has mentioned that he was the very first person to cut a check for Chuck Schumer. They have a friendship, a deep and abiding friendship, and they're both from that same sort of cultural milieu. They just enjoy each other. They will have a good rapport, and I think Chuck Schumer is figuring out like he can work with Donald Trump in a way that a lot of people, even on the right side of the aisle, can't. So watch out.
One question that comes from Ricochet, and I mean, this could be for you, it could be for a lot of probably most other people here as well, because you came out and you were vocal that you thought that Trump could win. A lot of people here this week have suggested otherwise. But everybody here is happy for the success and they want him to succeed. Why should folks that are reading columnists and watching people on television after this run-up for 15 months where there's no way Trump's going to win, there's no way Trump's going to win, the polls pointed in the other direction, is there a trust issue now between the readers of political publications and media?
Yeah, I think there certainly is a trust issue. I think most of the opposition to Trump wasn't about whether he could win, but about his particular principles and his demeanor and all sorts of things that even, if you're honest, whether or not you like Donald Trump, he has major baggage and issues. Different people of goodwill ended up on opposite sides of the issue of whether he was acceptable or not. I think that's fine. People can get over that type of thing. At the same time, I think there is an issue of elites everywhere need to be humbled, need to be humble about how much they know and how good their ideas are and how much New York and Washington, D.C. really should be setting agendas, controlling discussions, all of that. I think that's, it's a very important thing. And I mean, that's one of the things I love about Ricochet is you get wisdom from all over the country, different people weighing in on a matter. I mean, you post a question, you get feedback from all sorts of different people, stations in life, regions, and it's just very helpful. In D.C., it's all the same people with the same background and the same same sort of ideas about things. It's not very helpful and it's not very illuminating. And I am very happy. I mean, there are aspects of populism that are very dangerous. There are aspects of populism that are very American, very conservative. And I hope that we're in a moment where those good things can rise and the bad things can be held at bay.
Well, very good. Well, the folks at Ricochet would love to have you come back and maybe be a guest columnist every once in a while and share your wisdom. I want to thank you for your time, and it's been enjoyable this week.
Thank
you,
you,
Mollie. Thank you.